God refuses to let them forget what they did to you. There are some people who believe time automatically erases guilt. They think enough distractions, enough noise, enough ego, enough pride, enough new faces, enough temporary pleasures can eventually silence the truth of what they did to someone else. But that is not how God works, because when somebody deliberately wounds a genuine heart, when they knowingly manipulate, humiliate, discard, emotionally confuse, or spiritually exhaust a person who truly loved them, heaven does not simply ignore it. One of the most frightening forms of divine punishment comes when God refuses to allow a person to escape their own conscience. Narcissistic people eventually reach this place, trapped inside a mind that keeps replaying what they did. You, listening to this message today, spent years blaming yourselves for somebody else's cruelty. You questioned your worth. You questioned your appearance. You spent nights wondering how somebody could claim to love you while simultaneously tearing down your confidence piece by piece. Meanwhile, the narcissistic person appeared completely unaffected, cold, detached, proud. But eventually, something begins happening behind closed doors that other people cannot see. The memories start returning, not occasionally, constantly. A sentence you once said, a prayer you once prayed over them, a moment they ignored your tears, a time you forgave them when they did not deserve forgiveness, a night they intentionally let you suffer emotionally just to feed their ego. The memories return in fragments at first, then stronger, then repeatedly. The frightening part for them is that these reminders no longer feel random. It starts feeling personal. Deep down, their spirit knows exactly what happened. A narcissistic person can lie to friends. They can lie to family. They can lie on social media. They can even lie to themselves for a while. Conscience works differently. Conscience sits quietly and waits for distractions to die down. Once God decides it is time for accountability, conscience becomes impossible to outrun. They cannot sit quietly anymore. They always need stimulation, always need background noise, always need attention, always need validation, always need control over something or someone. Quiet moments become dangerous. Silence forces them to think, and thinking forces them to remember. Many narcissistic individuals grow increasingly agitated as time passes instead of becoming more peaceful. Most people assume evil brings freedom. It does not. Sin creates bondage. Manipulation creates bondage. Cruelty creates bondage. Emotional abuse creates bondage. Pride creates bondage. Eventually, the person who spent years trying to control others begins losing control over themselves. Every decision shapes the inner person. Every act of dishonesty changes the heart. Every act of cruelty darkens the spirit a little more. Every selfish decision slowly damages the soul from the inside. Many people fail to understand this about divine punishment. God does not always destroy a person instantly. Sometimes He allows them to become prisoners of what they created. Few punishments are more terrifying than waking up every day with the growing realization that you destroyed someone who genuinely loved you, especially when that person was sent by God Himself. Narcissists once prayed for love. They prayed for peace, for loyalty, for somebody who would finally treat them differently. And heaven answered, but instead of protecting the blessing, they abused it. Instead of nurturing it, they exploited it. Instead of valuing it, they took it for granted. Now the same mind that once justified hurting you has become filled with unrest. Not because you cursed them, not because you took revenge, not because you destroyed their life. God saw everything, and once heaven decides a lesson must be learned, no amount of ego can permanently silence the truth anymore. 1. They realize too late you were God's blessing. One of the most painful realizations a narcissistic person can experience arrives when they finally understand who you truly were after they already destroyed the relationship. Not while you were loving them, not while you were praying for them, not while you were staying patient through confusion, silence, mixed signals, disrespect, manipulation, or emotional neglect. No, the realization usually comes after your heart grows tired, after your spirit pulls away, after God begins separating you emotionally from the chaos they created. And suddenly, the person who once acted so confident, so arrogant, so emotionally untouchable, begins seeing your value everywhere. Narcissists often believe genuine people will always remain available. They assume your kindness has no limit. Your patience has no ending. Your forgiveness will always be there waiting for them, no matter how poorly they behave. So they become careless with your heart. They stop appreciating your loyalty. They stop honoring your presence. They stop protecting the very thing they once prayed for. Because before you entered their life, they were asking God for exactly what you carried: peace, loyalty, safety. A person who would not betray them. A person who would stay genuine even in difficult moments. And heaven answered those prayers through you. But instead of receiving the blessing with humility, they handled it with pride. They wanted control more than connection. They wanted ego validation more than love. They wanted attention more than intimacy. They wanted emotional power more than emotional honesty. So they tested you, ignored you, acted cold when you needed reassurance, punished your vulnerability instead of protecting it. And perhaps the saddest part of all is this: while you were praying for healing, they were feeding their ego from your pain. Some nights you cried yourself to sleep, wondering why somebody who claimed to love you could become so emotionally cruel. Meanwhile, they enjoyed feeling chaste, desired, important. They mistook your loyalty for weakness. But eventually, God removes the blindfold. Eventually, narcissists begin seeing the difference between temporary attention and a truly rare soul. And once that realization hits, it hits hard. Because people can replace attraction easily. They can replace conversations. They can replace distractions. They can replace surface-level connections. Replacing genuine love is different. Replacing somebody who prayed for you sincerely is different. Replacing somebody who carried real loyalty in a selfish world is different. Deep down, they know that. Now memories begin haunting them in ways they never expected. The way you encouraged them. The way you stayed patient during hard moments. The way you loved them even when they were difficult to love. The way your presence brought emotional comfort into their life. Narcissists rarely recognize peace while they are holding it. They recognize it after losing it. And once the realization fully settles into their spirit, their mind starts changing in disturbing ways. Sleep becomes harder. Rest becomes harder. Thinking clearly becomes harder. Because guilt grows louder, when somebody finally understands they destroyed one of God's blessings with their own hands. And little by little, the punishment begins attacking the one place they can no longer escape: their own mind. 2. God's punishment starts destroying their mental peace. One of the hardest truths for narcissistic people to face is realizing they cannot escape themselves. For a long time, they believed control was power. They thought manipulating your mind would somehow protect them from ever having to confront their own darkness. But eventually, God allows the very thing they tried to avoid to rise directly in front of them: themselves, their choices, their cruelty, their selfishness, their lies, their emotional games. Once heaven starts forcing accountability into a person's conscience, mental peace begins slipping away little by little. At first, narcissists often try pretending everything is normal. They force smiles, stay busy, act confident around other people, continue posting online, continue trying to look powerful, continue trying to appear emotionally untouched. Privately, something entirely different starts happening. Their thoughts become louder. Your memory starts interrupting ordinary moments throughout the day. A simple song suddenly reminds them of you. A random smell triggers memories. Certain places become emotionally uncomfortable. Late nights become unbearable. Silence starts attacking them. Sleep becomes difficult. Their thoughts begin racing constantly. Rest no longer feels restful. Even when they close their eyes, their brain refuses to settle down. Some wake up in the middle of the night, thinking about conversations they once ignored. Some replay the moment they watched you cry and did nothing. Some become haunted by the realization that they intentionally hurt somebody who truly loved them. The frightening part comes from how constant it becomes. Morning, afternoon, night. Your presence lingers in their mind like a truth they cannot erase anymore. Narcissists often spend years making other people emotionally unstable. They provoke confusion, cause emotional exhaustion, make people question reality, make people obsess over mixed signals and emotional inconsistency. For a while, they enjoy watching somebody else lose mental peace. Eventually, the weight of everything they created starts collapsing inward. Now their own thoughts begin turning against them. They struggle focusing at work, forget simple responsibilities, become emotionally reactive over small things, feel irritated constantly, experience emotional highs and lows that make no sense even to them. Some begin isolating themselves because they cannot explain what is happening internally. Others become paranoid. They start overthinking everything, reading too deeply into small situations, feeling emotionally threatened by things that never bothered them before. Underneath all of it sits one painful truth. Their spirit knows they destroyed something pure. The punishment becomes psychologically exhausting because conscience never stops talking once God decides a lesson must be learned. There are narcissists who now sit alone at night staring at the ceiling, unable to shut their own mind off. No relationship distracts them long enough. No attention feels satisfying enough. No validation lasts long enough. Nothing fully silences the unrest growing inside them. Some even begin experiencing physical symptoms from the stress. The same people who once mocked your emotions begin struggling to manage their own. Some days they cannot focus properly. Some nights they cannot rest at all. The pressure inside their mind keeps building quietly until it becomes impossible to ignore. Eventually, narcissists even begin speaking to therapists or psychologists because they can no longer understand why they feel mentally overwhelmed all the time. Their emotions feel unstable. Their thoughts keep returning to the past. Peace feels completely unreachable now. What makes the punishment spiritually terrifying is that deep down, they already know where the torment began. It began the moment they chose ego over love. It began the moment they intentionally wounded somebody God placed in their path. Even when professionals help them manage symptoms externally, conscience still remains alive internally. No medication can fully silence guilt. No distraction can permanently remove conviction from the soul. No ego can overpower the voice of truth forever, especially when God Himself keeps bringing the lesson back into their mind repeatedly. Narcissists slowly begin unraveling emotionally after losing the person they once treated as disposable. Not because you destroyed them, because they can finally see clearly what they destroyed themselves. Once mental peace disappears, the punishment becomes deeply personal, and little by little, the same emotional prison they once tried building for you starts closing around them instead. 3. They become trapped in the same mental prison they wanted for you. One of the most chilling parts of divine justice appears when God allows people to experience the very pain they once tried to force onto somebody else. Not because God is cruel, because God is revealing truth. Narcissists spend years believing emotional manipulation only affects other people. They think they can play with minds, distort emotions, create confusion, trigger insecurity, and walk away untouched. For a while, it even seems like they succeeded. You were the one crying. You were the one overthinking. You were the one losing sleep. You were the one replaying conversations in your head trying to understand what went wrong. Meanwhile, they looked calm, but hidden beneath that appearance was something far darker than most people realize. A narcissistic person often becomes addicted to emotional power. The ability to affect your emotions becomes intoxicating to them. Watching you chase them fed their ego. Watching you break emotionally made them feel significant. Watching you remain loyal while they gave the bare minimum made them feel superior. Some narcissists intentionally keep people emotionally unstable because control feels safer to them than genuine intimacy. If you were peaceful, they disrupted your peace. If you were confident, they attacked your confidence. If you were emotionally secure, they created confusion. If you were healing, they reopened wounds. And one of the most heartbreaking parts is this: you often blamed yourself while they quietly enjoyed the emotional control they had over your mind. There were nights you sat alone wondering why you suddenly felt anxious, insecure, emotionally drained, or mentally exhausted after speaking to them. Now, the same emotional prison they built for you has started locking around their own mind. The obsession changed direction. The overthinking changed direction. The emotional torment changed direction. Suddenly, they are the ones constantly checking your social media. They are the ones replaying old memories. They are the ones wondering who you are speaking to. They are the ones becoming emotionally unstable over the thought of losing access to you forever. And, unlike before, they cannot simply manipulate their way out of it. God is involved now. One of the hardest truths for narcissistic individuals to face is realizing they no longer control the emotional connection. They no longer control your reactions. You stopped feeding the cycle. And once narcissists lose emotional access to somebody who genuinely loved them, panic begins growing quietly inside them. Because deep down, they understand something they do not want to admit out loud. Nobody else loved them the way you did. Nobody else covered them in prayer the way you did. Nobody else stayed patient with their brokenness the way you did. Nobody else fought for the relationship while being wounded repeatedly the way you did. Now, their own mind keeps dragging them back to everything they took for granted. This becomes especially painful when they see you changing. A narcissistic person can tolerate hurting you more easily than watching you heal without them, because your healing becomes proof they no longer have control. And once that reality fully settles into their spirit, the mental torment intensifies. The same person who once wanted you emotionally trapped becomes trapped themselves. The same person who once wanted you constantly thinking about them becomes consumed by thoughts of you. The same person who once disrupted your peace loses their own peace completely. Divine justice often works through reversal. What people send out eventually returns carrying weight, especially when they harmed somebody God was protecting. If this message speaks to your spirit today, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and type, "God restored my peace," in the comments below. There are people listening right now who spent years feeling mentally exhausted because of narcissistic manipulation, and God is finally breaking those chains off your life. You are not crazy for what you felt. You were dealing with spiritual and emotional warfare disguised as love. And now the pressure that once lived inside your mind has started moving into theirs instead. The frightening part for the narcissist is that the emotional collapse no longer stays internal. It slowly starts affecting every part of their daily life. Their life starts falling apart because they can't function normally. Eventually, the punishment stops hiding inside the narcissist's thoughts and starts showing up in the way they live their life. At first, they still try maintaining appearances. They still try acting composed, still try acting confident, still try acting emotionally unaffected. But inner instability always leaks outward sooner or later. The human mind was never designed to carry ongoing guilt, obsession, emotional corruption, pride, spiritual unrest, and psychological pressure without consequences appearing somewhere else. So, little by little, their life starts becoming harder to manage. The narcissist, who once looked so controlled, begins fumbling ordinary responsibilities in ways that become impossible to ignore. Simple tasks suddenly feel mentally exhausting because their mind never fully rests anymore. Conversations become difficult to follow because internally they are distracted almost all the time. They start forgetting things constantly. Appointments, deadlines, responsibilities, important conversation, promises they made only days earlier. People around them begin noticing the change. Co-workers notice carelessness where precision once existed. Family members notice emotional unpredictability. Friends notice irritability and exhaustion replacing confidence. Something about the narcissist feels different now. The same person who once manipulated situations carefully now struggles keeping their own life organized. Their emotions swing harder from day to day. Small frustrations trigger reactions far bigger than the situation deserves because internally they are already overwhelmed. And deep down, they know it. They can feel themselves slipping. Not in dramatic movie-like ways, in real-life ways, the kind that slowly dismantle a person from the inside out. Their routines become inconsistent. Their judgment becomes clouded. Some begin making reckless decisions they normally would have avoided before. Others sabotage opportunities because mentally they are too exhausted to think clearly anymore. Even simple daily functioning starts becoming difficult. Getting through the day feels heavier. Maintaining emotional control feels harder. Keeping life stable requires more effort than it once did. And perhaps the most frightening part for them is recognizing they no longer feel like themselves anymore. The narcissist who once enjoyed controlling other people emotionally now struggles controlling their own reactions, thoughts, responsibilities, and behavior. Everything starts becoming disorganized at the same time. Relationships weaken because people grow tired of the instability. Work performance suffers because concentration keeps collapsing. Important parts of life slowly start slipping through their hands. Meanwhile, pride keeps them trapped. Instead of humbling themselves before God, they continue resisting accountability internally. They continue searching for distractions instead of truth. But distractions stop working once the consequences become woven into daily life itself. Now they wake up carrying pressure before the day even begins. And no matter where they go, the unrest follows them, because the punishment is no longer emotional alone anymore. It has started affecting their ability to function, think clearly, maintain stability, and hold their own life together. The frightening irony behind all of this becomes impossible to ignore. The person who once tried making you emotionally unstable can no longer maintain stability themselves. The person who once disrupted your peace now wakes up, unable to hold on to their own. And as their life becomes increasingly disorganized, desperate thoughts begin rising inside them. They start wanting access to you again, your attention, your reassurance, your emotional presence, because somewhere deep inside, they still associate you with peace, grounding, comfort, and stability. But while the narcissist struggles to stop their own life from unraveling, God quietly begins removing their ability to reach you altogether. 5. God blocks them from reaching you while restoring your peace. What makes this punishment even harder for the narcissist is realizing they can no longer reach you the way they once did before. For a long time, they relied on emotional access to maintain control. They knew how to pull your attention back toward them. They knew how to trigger your emotions. They knew how to create confusion strong enough to keep you emotionally attached even after they hurt you. As long as they still had access to your heart, they felt powerful. Even your pain fed their ego because your emotional reactions reminded them they still had influence over your life. But God eventually grows tired of watching his children remain trapped inside cycles of manipulation. There comes a season where heaven begins closing doors. The narcissist can no longer force back open. Suddenly their usual tactics stop working. The guilt trips stop working. The emotional games stop working. The disappearing and reappearing stop working. The manipulation loses power because your spirit is no longer responding the same way. At first, the narcissist does not fully understand what is happening. They assume they can eventually pull you back in again the same way they always have before. But something feels different now. Your silence feels calmer. Your emotions feel less reactive. Your attention feels more distant. And the more they realize they are losing emotional access to you, the more unsettled they become internally. Because narcissists often depend on emotional control for stability. Once that control disappears, panic quietly starts replacing confidence. They begin watching from a distance instead, trying to figure out whether you still care, trying to see if you are still emotionally attached, trying to sense whether they can still affect your emotions somehow. But God keeps separating you further from the chaos they created. Many people listening to this message have spent years feeling emotionally drained because somebody kept pulling them back into cycles of confusion, false hope, manipulation, disappointment, and emotional instability. You prayed. You cried. You begged God for clarity. You asked heaven why somebody who claimed to love you kept hurting you over and over again. Meanwhile, you did not realize God was slowly preparing your release. Your mind becomes quieter. Your emotions become clearer. Your spirit stops craving validation from the person who wounded you. And honestly, few things terrify a narcissistic person more than losing emotional control over somebody they once manipulated easily. Because your healing becomes proof that their influence is dying, they can feel the separation happening. They can feel your spirit slipping beyond their reach. And while they continue spiraling internally, God begins restoring something inside you that the narcissist spent years damaging. Your peace returns slowly, but enough for you to finally breathe again. Enough for you to sleep without constantly replaying painful memories. Enough for you to stop blaming yourself for somebody else's cruelty. Enough for you to recognize that love should never require emotional suffering to survive. You start releasing old pain, old confusion, old attachment, old emotional exhaustion. You begin removing things connected to the past, changing your routines, rearranging your home, creating distance from memories that once kept your spirit trapped in grief. And while all of this healing quietly unfolds in your life, heaven begins opening a completely different path in front of you. 6. God opens a blessed new beginning for you while they remain stuck in their punishment. While the narcissist continues struggling under the weight of everything they created, God begins doing something completely different in your life. He starts restoring you, not instantly, not through shortcuts, not through revenge, through healing. At first, you may not even recognize it happening because the process feels quiet compared to the chaos you survived before. After spending so much time emotionally exhausted, manipulated, confused, and mentally drained, peace can almost feel unfamiliar in the beginning. But little by little, your spirit starts breathing again. You wake up without the same heaviness sitting on your chest. You stop checking your phone with anxiety. You stop waiting for emotional validation from somebody who repeatedly wounded you. Your mind becomes calmer. Your emotions become steadier. The attachment that once felt impossible to break starts loosening its grip on your life. And honestly, many people do not realize how much damage narcissistic manipulation causes until they finally escape it. You spent so long surviving emotional instability that simple peace almost feels unnatural at first. No constant confusion, no emotional games, no walking on eggshells, no wondering which version of somebody you are going to deal with today. Just peace. The kind of peace your nervous system had been begging for during all those sleepless nights where you questioned your worth because of somebody else's cruelty. God starts restoring your clarity too. You begin seeing the relationship differently. You stop romanticizing the pain. You stop making excuses for behavior that broke your spirit. You stop blaming yourself for somebody else's emotional corruption. And perhaps the most powerful part of healing is this. You finally realize losing the narcissist was never the real tragedy. Losing yourself would have been, because now your focus slowly shifts away from who hurt you and toward the life God is trying to build for you next. Many people listening to this message are entering a season where heaven is removing emotional baggage that no longer belongs in your future. God starts rebuilding your confidence from the inside out. You begin remembering who you were before somebody convinced you that you were hard to love. And while all of this healing quietly unfolds, new doors begin opening in your life. Healthier relationships, healthier thinking, healthier environments. You are going to encounter people who carry genuine kindness instead of manipulation. People who communicate honestly, people who bring calmness into your life instead of confusion, because God was never planning for your story to end in emotional suffering. The narcissist believed they were your final destination. They were not. They were a painful lesson. But your future was never meant to stay chained to somebody who only valued you after destroying you. Meanwhile, the narcissist remains trapped in the consequences of their own choices. And perhaps the deepest part of their punishment is not simply losing you. It is watching you become healthier, stronger, calmer, wiser, and more spiritually grounded without them. Because every step of your healing reminds them of what they lost. Every moment of your peace reminds them of the chaos they created. Every blessing entering your life becomes another reminder that they destroyed something sacred when they chose ego over love. And deep down, they know the truth now. God was protecting you the entire time.